I predict a Duke's victory.
Welcome to another episode of the Crush Fantasy Football Podcast. Dolan, you are across the world. It looks like you just woke up. Come on, tell the people what you're doing, where you are.
Yeah, it's nighttime over here. Or no, morning time, sorry, over here for me, nighttime for you. So definitely still working on getting up and at 'em. I'm over in Chiang Mai, Thailand. So it's like northern Thailand. I just spent a couple days pretty deep in the jungle, but I'm back a little closer to the city now. In, I don't know how you say it, like Nimanihheim area. I'm probably butchering that, but everybody just calls it Neiman for short. So yeah, having a grand old time over here. And then I'm heading in about a week down south to go check out, some beaches and islands and switch the vibe up a little bit. How are things back home?
Dude, when you say in the jungle, what do you mean? Like mosquitoes? Have you been going on hikes? What have you been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not actively seeking out mosquitoes. I've been spraying my fair share of bug spray for sure. And that's gotten its use. But yeah, northern Thailand in general is pretty jungle heavy. And so I went probably a good like hour and a half outside the city to go into like a little bungalow and stay there for a couple of days, do some hiking, exploring, all that fun stuff. So it was a good time.
Did you wear a mosquito net when you slept?
Oh, they had one on the bed. Yeah. So
how does that work? I've never used one before. I've always been curious. Do you just like a blanket? I'm picturing like you pull it above like, or do you go all the way over the head?
It was like one of those beds where it has like the 4 pillars, I guess you can stay like sticking out of each of the corner. And so it just like drapes down. You've definitely seen them in like TV shows and whatnot, where it almost looks decorative, but in some cases probably is, but it's functional as well.
Yeah, the 4 seasons, you don't really need them. But all right, I digress. Sounds fun. Dude,
my budget
it's
does not have the 4 seasons on the docket.
Dude, it's crazy trying to record across the world. Just for the people, last episode, which you'll probably never see, he was in Korea. This episode, Thailand, right?
No, Korea we got.
As well,
Korea was a success.
Yeah,
we have one failure in Thailand so far.
Got it. So if we had to assess, the Korean Wi-Fi is better than the Thai Wi-Fi. All right,
fair. Small sample size, but so far, yep.
No. Went to a wedding this weekend. Assume you didn't see any pictures, but Anna and Garrett's A+, incredible appetizers, sushi, lobster rolls. They had these little, I don't even know what they are, like ahi crisps, really good stuff all the way through. Fun, dancing, you know the drill. So it was good, and I'm still tired from it. Not as tired as you are.
As you should be.
But
Dude, I'm tired of watching Martin Harrison play football. That's what I'm tired of. That's what has me looking like this.
Dude, 3 weeks and you're already saying that? Come on.
And the first week was good,
Ride with your guy.
I'm riding with him. But, man, those 2 drops were brutal. Those 2 paired with a CD injury in the first drive of the game is just not a good week for fantasy football for your boy.
Can we actually talk about that? I don't know if this is a hot take. People saying, like, oh, my God, that's why you don't run your star receiver. I think that's kind of stupid talk, right? One, they don't do it that often. Those plays typically really, really work, especially with him. He's a good runner. So, yeah, I wouldn't do that all the time, but mixing it in once in a while, it's his job, right? So you agree?
Yeah, I'm more or less with you there. I think it'd be one thing if it's like, oh, he was nursing the injury already, and like you want to be a little extra cautious in that scenario. But when it's like when he's fully healthy, like you don't have to do anything egregious there. And again, it was the first drive of the game. It's not like they were doing it in the fourth quarter when the game was out of reach or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. People just like to complain. I think that one's a little crazy. But I mean, some teams have changed it. Like, what was it? 3, 4, maybe even 5 years ago, Mahomes got hurt on a QB sneak. And I don't think the Chiefs have run a QB sneak ever since then. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys do say, nope, we're done with that. Sorry. Fun time over. We'll figure something else out. And I guess for them, what I do find interesting too is like they have Kevontae Turpin and like maybe Jaden Blue's a thing to kind of play that type of role is where I could see the other side of the argument is like, don't put your superstar in that situation. But yeah, I'm not out here, saying, darn you coaching staff, my wide receiver one's hurt because of you.
Yeah. The reason it works is because no one expects CD to do it. So I honestly don't think it's crazy. All right. As always on this show, we like to get our hot takes out of the way so we can provide level-headed, in-depth, sincere analysis the rest of the time. So for Take Montezuma, sponsored by Soiree Season, if you're looking for a new age wedding registry, if it's that time in your life, looking for something different, check out the Etsy of wedding registry Soiree Season, promo code CrushFF for 25% off. Website link in 2 weeks is currently the update I got. All right, I'll go. So this one hits home a little bit, but my Take Montezuma is I think that working out hungover not only is not a bad thing, but I think it's a life cheat code, especially running. When you run, the only thing your brain wants to do is stop running. It just convinces you, like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? This sucks. This sucks. But when you're hungover, your brain doesn't work as well. So your brain's actually not telling you that this sucks. So you're actually beating your hangover because there's some evidence adrenaline beats hangovers, and you're actually getting a good run because your brain's not telling you this sucks. So you're killing two birds with one stone, and running hungover, and to a lesser extent lifting, but running hungover is a life cheat code that nobody wants to embrace.
I definitely agree with you on that one, on everything you said, except for the part where your brain says this doesn't suck, because my brain definitely tells me this sucks when I'm working out hungover, and it's pretty much telling me that the entire time, or at least it takes like a good 20 to 30 minutes. But I think
moves
like
slower though.
Once you get through that hump, it's like, okay, hangover feels like it's been cured. So if you can get over that slog, I'm with you, but I will not tell you that there is no suck in that, because my brain is not just like that numb that it doesn't acknowledge like, oh my God, all I want to be doing is lying in bed right now.
Dude, mine doesn't fire at the same rate. I just like the amount of thoughts per second must like significantly decrease. And so even if it's like, why are you out here? It's like not as constant.
Well, we're not wired to work out voluntarily. Like it is against every fiber of like our natural human DNA to do that. So especially when you're hungover, I get why your brain's like, this is not what we should be doing right now.
We need what? What do you mean we're not wired to? We're wired to run across the planet catching animals and plants. What? That's working out.
Exactly. And so that's why like doing it purely voluntarily is like so against everything in our DNA, because like it is human nature from thousands and thousands of years ago. And like I actually read a book on this. Like I'm not just spitballing here.
Yeah.
You know, to have to hunt for our food. And so it's like, hey, if we're not hunting for our food, we need to conserve every ounce of energy we have. So people aren't just going around, lifting weights in the year 227 to try and look good or to try and like improve their health span. They're doing it now for all of those reasons. But back then it was like every ounce of energy you had to be allocated to survival. And in human nature haven't really caught up to that yet. So
you're saying the only good time to work out is when you're starving and your body needs food.
I'm saying you are not,
your brain's
humans
like,
are not wired to want to exert energy unless they have to. Exercising for entertainment or, long-term health span is not something that triggers that natural human response. That's something we have to actively overcome to convince ourselves to go to the gym and such.
The natural human response is when you're hungover to just lie there.
Exactly.
Even back in the day. Just wallow in it. Man, I didn't think you'd agree with me, to be honest. I thought I was in the minority there. One quick caveat, when it's like an all-time hangover, those where you really can't move, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about like a good medium.
Just the lingering headache.
No, more than the lingering headache. But not one of the 1% nights. Because those nights you can't do anything after. All right, that was Take Montezuma. Thankful for our courageous sponsor for staying with us through all these days. All right, Dolan, what we're going to do today is something that I don't love to do, but we're going to revisit the consensus rookie running back rankings for Dynasty and take a look at the top 5. And after 3 weeks of NFL football, what has changed? Where do we currently have them ranked? Has it changed from 3 weeks ago? And the reasons why. So I think we'll probably deep dive those top 5 guys: Ashton Genty, Amari Hampton, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and Caleb Johnson. Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that? If not, fire us up.
No, but I think or I guess yes. I don't know why I said no, instinctively said no there. But I think the one
Yeah.
point that you made is probably worth chatting about before we get into these individual guys is this is dynasty rankings and it has only
Mhm.
been 3 weeks. So you don't want to like be egregious with your adjustments. But I do think that doesn't mean you can't adjust at all. Like your rankings have to change
Mhm.
somewhat from where we were 5 weeks ago. Like I think the last name you said on the list, and we'll get into him, like has shown some serious major red flags. And I think that's the type of performance that you have to drop down your list. But then you also have to be willing to, I think, move guys up when they really pop on film or when they get more usage right out of the gates than you thought they were, and things like that. So you don't want to overreact too much. I think especially if you're overreacting to, small sample sizes or statistics. But if you can make tweaks based on, okay, like the film looks good or the trends look good. So maybe someone hasn't truly blown up yet, but it's like each week they're becoming a bigger part of the offense because some rookies do take time. You don't necessarily want to bump guys down too low if they're just not getting the work yet. But if they're on film and they look great, it's okay to bump them up. Or if they're on film and they're fumbling the ball a bunch and look slow and they're running back and they get tackled every time, within a second, sometimes you do have to make some of those tweaks. So I think you and I are on different ends of the spectrum with how willing you need to be flexible. So I'm curious how reluctant you are here to make some of these changes, but I think we'll get into that a little bit in our rankings. But anything macro you want to call out in that regard before we get into
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, just the way I personally view it as the guys in, let's say, the upper tier that are like drafted high in the real NFL draft tended to be like the studs coming out. I'm less reluctant to change after a small period of time versus the guys taken later in the draft, who a lot of their value in Dynasty does depend on situation and what's around them and getting run or carries. And so those guys, I'm more willing to kind of move around, and even if you go deeper than that. Whereas the top guys, I don't love changing my mind after 3 games.
Yeah. And I do think, the further down the rankings you get, the easier it is to say, okay, my RB14 now looks like my RB8. But if your RB5 all of a sudden becomes your RB1, that's, a tougher
Big
gap to close.
All right. Do you want to talk about Genty first, or since he's my guy, do you want me to go first?
I can go because I think my change is probably a little spicier. And this isn't crazy, I don't think.
Yep.
But, Genty came into the offseason as the pretty clear, not just running back one, but, 101 overall in every draft. And I've actually moved him down to my RB3 spot in my rookie rankings, or RB3 of the rookies, I should say, because I think some people probably still have him as their RB3 overall in dynasty formats. And to me, this isn't a sign of Genty falling down. It really is the case of, I think, two guys have passed him. And we'll get to those two guys here shortly. But the offensive line concerns in Vegas are a very real thing. And I'd be pretty shocked if they find a way to figure that out this year. So I think it's looking more and more like this first year for Genty's just not going to be any good. I think he's still going to get enough volume to be, probably a flex worthy play on a weekly basis, but not someone you feel super great about putting into your lineup consistently. But the impressive thing is, I think our dear friend, the pilot, I think it was, sent me this stat the other day. It might have been you, but I'm pretty sure it was the pilot. Ashton Genty has 145 yards this year, I believe. Was it you who sent me this?
It's been floating everywhere, but yeah,
Okay.
I don't think I sent you it, but I know. Yes, I've seen the stat.
144 of them are after contact, so he's still performing at the level everyone expected of him. He's pulling yards out of thin air, but the problem is like he has to do that on every single down. Like the Raiders' offensive line is that bad, and I do think they have a good coaching staff. I do think with another offseason under their belt, they're not going to enter 2026 with the supporting cast this egregious. But for right now, because I think this is going to be kind of a wasted year for Genty, I have to account for that in my rankings and bump him below two guys who I think have really exceeded my expectations to start the year. So where do you have Genty? I think I'd be shocked if you bumped him down a full 2 spots.
Nope. I still have him at 101 overall. Yeah, so this is one of the ones I just don't want to overreact. So we drafted him to be kind of this no question workhorse. I'm with you that this is no longer the case, and we probably have to re-underwrite the ceiling this year. But for a dynasty perspective, the main thing that that we like is what you just said, is we drafted because he was a quote unquote generational talent. And what we've seen so far hasn't totally changed our opinion there because he has to do so much with so little. The two things that concern me the most are what you said, the offensive line. So, I mean, he's been hit at or behind the line on 57% of his carries this year. His yards per touch is pretty terrible at 2.8. And so he's number 7 in the NFL in stacked boxes. So I think this is all concerning, especially for redraft. I don't think it's necessarily just because it happened in the first 3 weeks that Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll aren't going to get any better with the play design, honestly, with the offensive line play in general. So I think, yes, concerning. Let's see how it shakes out over the next 3 weeks. The thing that worries me even more, or let's say equally than the offensive line, is we drafted him, when I say bell cow, we thought he was going to run the ball all the time, and we thought he was going to play third down. And so I think the receiving work is what concerns me the most, honestly, is like they're bringing in Dylan Lobby and Zamir White in 2-minute drills in obvious passing situations. When in college, Genty had really good receiving numbers. And I think with a redraft ADP of like 12 overall, I think everyone expected him to get some of that receiving work. If this was just he'd get 15 carries a game and run goal line, he wouldn't have been drafting that high. And so I think that's the most shocking thing, right? He's only had 6 targets so far, well, essentially a 6% target share. Yeah, and I think all of this combined, his year one has taken a huge hit. But for Dynasty, all the things that made him in the tier of his own type prospect still apply. And I'm not sure any of it has changed that drastically. Just one more thing. Gibbs' first 3 games, right? He was at average 8 points, CMC 10, Derrick Henry 5. So, like, there are examples of really, really good running backs starting slow.
Yeah, nothing to add on
Do you think there's any hope?
Than I think the passing game hope is the one area where, at least for this year and moving forward, I would feel pretty good. I don't think they're going to keep him on the sideline for that long. It's not like, Zamir White and Dylan Lobby are earning those snaps. I think it is more of just like hey, let's not give everything to Genty, but the coaching staff on multiple occasions has said, hey, we want to get this guy the ball more. And I think that's one of the easy ways for it to manifest. So I'm not as concerned about that aspect. I am just concerned about the offensive line.
Yeah. So then going forward, is this something, so you imagine like they just brought in Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll. It's not that easy to overhaul an offensive line, right? So is there really a way to change this for year 2 and longer, right?
I mean, it is, open up the checkbook, draft some guys early. I think offensive line is one of those things that, like you said, it's not like, a running back where you can go out and sign one guy and solve your problem. Like this Raiders offensive line looks bad across the board. Like they need to find multiple starters, and it's not going to be easy to do. So And what's frustrating too is like they're running a lot of 2 tight end sets, and they have 2 tight ends, and they should be able to come up with some creative ways to run the ball that way. But they're just getting absolutely blown off the ball every single play. So I really do think it's a personnel issue, and that's teams aren't going to be trading away good offensive linemen before the trade deadline. That just has to be an off-season thing.
Yeah, but most of the sites had their offensive line ranked like 19th, 20th coming into the year. I mean, that's not 32nd. So maybe it's a bad start. Maybe this will change, but there's concerning things. I just don't think after 3 games that we change it for Dynasty just yet. And I wouldn't trade him low, right? I'd essentially hold at the value you drafted him at this time. But you want to go on to the number 2. I think the consensus number 2 pick in Amarian Hampton. So no shocker here. I still have him at number 2. Where do you have?
Yeah, so he's the one that bumped up to number 1 for me. I think, yes, he was a lower drafted pick than Genty, but he was still a first-round pick. He went to an offensive infrastructure that I like a lot better. Obviously, the Chargers are throwing the ball more than anybody thought we would this year, but they're still in his DNA, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, I should say. They want to pound the rock. From a talent perspective, I don't think the gap between Hampton and Genty is that huge. And I think the situation is just really starting to manifest in Hampton's favor. And we're seeing that. And I think it's pretty clear that for this year, Hampton is going to beat out Genty. Like, I don't think many people are going to argue that fact. And so it's just like, okay, when a running back shelf life is that short, give me the guy who's going to produce this year. And I think come season's end, I could see him having league winning upside because, I think one of the big knocks on Hampton coming out was, well, he's probably going to split time with Najee Harris, who just tore his Achilles, and, his career might be over. And there's not another back in Los Angeles that's going to, eat into that workload in the same way that that Harris was. And so I just think when you check all the boxes already, and then your biggest obstacle comes out of the way, you're a part of an offense that looks like one of the best, most efficient in the league, the production's going to come. And we saw that for the first time this past Sunday. Like, Hampton was one of those guys who was a little slow out of the gates in week 1 and week 2. And then all of a sudden, week 3, he explodes. And whether that's a turning point and he's consistently producing those week 3 numbers week in and week out, I'm not sure, but I think it's going to become pretty close to a regular thing where he steps into a bell cow role on a good offense. And it's just kind of a no-brainer moving forward that he's an elite running back. And at this point, if I had Ashton Genty and someone offered me Omarion Hampton for him, I wouldn't have to think too hard to hit the accept button.
Yeah. It's so funny how much a week changes things, right? If we would have had this conversation last week, but before the Najee injury, I think it would be a little different. The thing that concerns me a little bit is he hasn't looked that good, just like purely running the ball. I mean, he's at 5th highest rate of stuffed runs. Him and Genty both have over 19% tackle for loss. I'm with you. He's going to have a better year than Genty this year. I think that's, let's call it unquestionable at this point. I love that he's tied to a competent organization, Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert. So all signs are pointing up there. The one thing that could limit his ceiling is Greg Roman running backs tend to not get fantastic target shares. So he did have a great target share last week once Najee got hurt. So maybe that's a sign of things to come. But historically, that hasn't been the case. And so if there are other pass catchers, which there are in Los Angeles, and I guess he's competing not with Najee, but he's competing with Ladd, Keenan, and QJ, then the receiving numbers might be harder to come by. But I still think he's going to be awesome this year and years going forward. And I do like his situation much better. I'm just going to stick to the talent bet on Genty over him.
Yeah, and definitely not a bad bet. That's one that I think more often than not does work out on the Genty or whoever the top Dynasty 10 drafted running back is more often than not.
Yeah. Well, like you said, Hampton was a first-round draft pick, right? So
exactly, it's not like this is some guy who was drafted in the 4th, and Tim. He's I think just as much a stud in his own right.
Yep. All right, number 3 on consensus. Where do you currently have Travion Henderson?
Yeah, not a big drop off for Henderson for me. He was my number 3 on the board, but I had him, back and forth. Like, I think I probably switched him and Quinshon Judkins on my rankings every week up until our draft, it felt like, because I really like both of those Ohio State guys a ton. But I do think he's, at this point, fallen below Judkins, who we'll get to in a second, but not very far. So I just have Henderson down at my RB4. I think the lack of usage has been a little surprising. I think not so much from Ramondre Stevenson getting more snaps than him, but the Antonio Gibson usage has been a little frustrating and definitely limited what we've seen from Henderson so far. But I do think that all those fumbles from everybody else last week gives me a little bit of optimism. I mean, both Stevenson and Gibson have had a ton of fumble problems throughout their whole career, so it's not like this was just some fluky flash in the pan type of game. And I do think, one of the main reasons coaches like to make rookies earn their playing time and kind of ease them into their role is they don't like to see rookie mistakes. But if the guys ahead of them on the depth chart are making those rookie mistakes and turning the ball over themselves, like, why not give it to the guy who has the most juice on the offense? And so I still think, and part of the reason, Gibson's on the field is because he has that pass catching profile and he's done well. I think Travion's going to take over that role fully and continue to eat into Ramondre Stevenson's work as well. Plus, obviously, the existing work he's already getting. And I just still think that Josh McDaniels offense is so friendly for pass catching running backs. And I think Henderson, probably outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, fits that role as good as anybody in the NFL. And he's just the perfect archetype to really gobble up a ton of fantasy production. It's taken a little longer than I would have wanted, but I still think, come second half of the season, he's going to find his groove and just be an absolute machine and go on an absolute heater down the stretch. Where are you at with Henderson? Have you moved him up or down, or you still got him at 3?
Still got him at 3. I love Henderson. I honestly wanted to put him higher pre-draft, but I basically had
It's hard to
Travion
put
over
him ahead of
Quinshon
those two guys.
Really, yeah, fair. I had him over Quinshon just because I value pass catching, like personally, more than rushing for running backs. And so I think Henderson has an incredible pass catching and pass blocking profile. And yeah, I mean, you can already see it, right? When they use him, he has 11 catches on the year. That's top 10% amongst running backs, even with like the low snap rates that he's getting. Yeah, I mean, you said the running back thing. I mean, that has to help. I don't know, unless they're just completely stubborn. I doubt Ramondre is going to completely go away unless it's like a couple more games of what he did last weekend. Yeah, so I have absolutely zero concern with Travion in Dynasty. I think you'd like to be able to play him, but sometimes rookies take a little longer, right? Maybe it takes a while to get the trust of the coaching staff for whatever reason, right? Maybe he's understanding the playbook. But I think, like you said, his path to relevance is going to happen this year, and I think he's going to be explosive when he gets there. And so Patriots are, I think, 3rd in pass rate over expected. So he should be right there ready to feed once those higher snap shares come. Could be this week. So yeah, I didn't change him at all, and I still like his pass catching upside more than Quinshon.
Yeah, and I do think, like you touched on there, like it could be this week. I think we'll continue to see some progression this week, but I do think it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn. I think it's going to be week after week after week, and we're going to look up in 5-6 weeks, and by then it's like, oh, okay, he's getting the workload everybody wanted him to see. He's probably not going to be a bell cow. Like I think your point about Ramondre not going anywhere is probably true, but we saw in college Henderson can still dominate in that type of role. And, the common comparison we have gotten is Jahmyr Gibbs. And, well, I think obviously that ceiling is borderline unattainable for anybody not named Jahmyr Gibbs. I do think, he can play that role well. And it's proven that it can be very lucrative for fantasy, even if he's someone who's still only getting 50 to 60% of the snaps.
Yeah. The interesting part is all of our top 3, they've all had pass blocking concerns, which is interesting. I do wonder if that's where Genty's sacrificing why he's sacrificing his passing down. Travion had the reputation as being an awesome pass blocker, but that hasn't come to fruition yet. And even Hampton's had his concerns. So it's going to be interesting to see if they try to bring anyone in. 100%. Quinshon.
Yeah, so this is the biggest mover for me. And I think this is one where every once in a while, you just kind of see something that makes you have to act quickly with conviction. Otherwise, you're never going to get a chance. Obviously, he missed the first game of the season. He's dealing with the whole legal issue. Signs indicate no suspension or anything troublesome is going to come from that. And we talked about this on that podcast last week that went into the ether and it'll never go anywhere. Last week, he only played, hold on, let me pull the numbers back up. He only played 20 snaps, but on those 20 snaps, he saw 10 carries and 3 targets. So getting 13 opportunities on 20 snaps was a great sign that like, hey, this guy's going to be a focal part of their offense. When he's on the field, they want to get the ball. And then he looked awesome. He was explosive. He did everything you want to see. They took the training wheels off as soon as game 2. And granted, this is still with him having like a week and a half worth of practice under his belt. First time in the NFL. Took the training wheels off. He had 18 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown. And most importantly, the Browns pulled off the biggest upset of the week. He also saw 2 targets, which he only turned in like 1 catch for a yard. But I actually went back and watched all of his snaps in that Ravens game in his debut. And then I went back and watched the full game against the Packers. And I just kept watching him and thinking, holy crap, this is a young Jonathan Taylor. Everything about the way he plays just reminds me so much of JT, like the same build, similar explosiveness. I think he even has a sprinkle of a better pass catching profile than Taylor, and not much. And so it's just like, I saw exactly what I needed to see to be like, this is the kind of guy that needs to move up my rankings because I think he is going to be an absolute superstar, and I'm willing to plant my flag on that. And so moving him ahead of Henderson was pretty easy. I think, again, I have those two, or pre-draft, I had those two neck and neck, and was switching them every week anyway. And also your point about the pass catching, I should call out, like my brain always goes to thinking in half PPR settings because that's the format we play in. I think if you're in a full PPR, Henderson's probably even more valuable and so on and so forth. And that's maybe a tougher argument. But I got Judkins as my RB2 right now. I think the only one that I would trade him away straight up for is Amari and Hampton at this point. And as crazy as it sounds, if you were to send me an offer of Genty today, I do think I would decline it just because I think I've seen exactly what I want to see. I think he's going to be the engine on that offense, and it's crazy. And I think to really showcase how high I am, I got an offer basically of a late first round pick in 2028 probably late. I mean, it's hard to say in 2028. And Lad McConkey, and I was like, I don't think so.
Wow. I think I'd take it.
The book says I should, but I think it's one of those ones where it's just like I've been too quick, I think, at times to take profit on guys, and I wouldn't like my running back room enough without him. And I think, when Rasheed and CD come back, I like my receiver room, so it's probably a little too roster dependent, my thinking here, but I do not want to trade away a potential superstar running back to our league's back-to-back champ. I just can't do it.
Yeah, fair. Good. Don't do it. How quickly, the most impressive part about all of this, and I agree with you, he's looked the best, I think, by far, out of all the rookie running backs. How quickly it's come to fruition, missing camp, missing week 1, being away from the team, and how good he's looked has been so impressive. And the Browns noticed it. They gave him 95% of the rushes in week 3, up from 46% in week 2. He's averaging 5.5 yards a carry.
Against a defense that a lot of people were calling the best in the league after 2 weeks.
Yep. 104 yards after contact. I'm so mad I don't have him anywhere. The two downsides, the things that I'll continue to harp on, is the passing game.
Well,
they still
real quick,
put
before
Ford
we
in.
Get into that, the one thing to your point about like how impressive he's done it without the practice and just kind of hitting in the ground running, it's also kind of a pattern for him. Like, I think part of the reason I'm so eager to bump him up my rankings is like, this is exactly what we saw out of him as Ole Miss. Like, as an 18-year-old true freshman, he put up like 1,400 yards, I don't know, 300 on the ground. And so it's like, sometimes you just see these dudes where it doesn't matter who they're playing against, how young they are, how inexperienced they are. It's just like, they are natural. They were born to do this. And so it's like, I think people overcorrected for the fact that, he was in a split backfield last year and his numbers weren't eye-popping because he was sharing a field with Travion Henderson. But it's like, when you give this dude the rock all the time, like, he's proven that he can absolutely dominate. But sorry, I cut you off. I wanted to call that out.
No, you're good.
Think the early breakout age is important to mention as well, and didn't want to slip it in there.
No. I mean, he was sharing a backfield with Travion Henderson, and now he's sharing a backfield with Jerome Ford. Okay, my concern is the passing. I mean, he's had kind of a 7% target share, 18% route participation, basically 1 yard per route run. It's a super small sample size, but it's happened kind of everywhere he's been. So, I mean, if he's Jonathan Taylor, right, you'll live with that. If he's Nick Chubb, you'll live with that. But the guys who are truly elite in fantasy football at the running back position are the guys who do both. And even so, the guys who trend towards pass catching. And so that's the only thing. And I don't want to take anything away from Judkins. That's the only thing that I would be slightly hesitant before you give up Lad and a first, Mr. Pilot. And then the other thing is, I don't know how much stock you put into this in Dynasty format, just kind of the situation around him. The Browns aren't heading anywhere great. That could be, you could look at that glass half full. You're like, okay, what are we going to do that's competent? We're going to run Quinshon Judkins because we don't have quarterback. Or you can look at it kind of like we looked at Genty, right? Are they ever going to put this thing together? Even though the line looks way better, is he just going to fake stack boxes for the next 2 years? So I think it depends on the person, how you look at that, but it's not a fantastic organization.
And the one thing about that too that gives me a little bit of confidence is like, we've seen time after time, outside of the Watson era that was just a disaster, like Kevin Stefanski is a pretty good coach when it comes to drawing up a rushing offense. And so I think between having probably not the elite offensive line they had at Chubb's peak, but still a much better one than we saw in Vegas, and a good coach that you trust. And they've got, I think we're big Harold fans, what we're talking about with the Raiders throwing a lot of 12 personnel, multiple tight end sets out there. We're seeing that in Cleveland too. And so I do think there's just a lot more reason to be excited about the holistic running game. I think Ashton Genty would be doing great work in this ecosystem as well, even if it's not one that, it still has the stench of the Browns, right? It's not one you want to get excited about, but it's not looking like one that's going to hold him back too much either.
All right. Talk about something else we don't want to get excited about. I think number 5 consensus running back, Mr. Caleb Johnson from Iowa. So I'll let you take it and then
So I have to
jump in.
This one is gross. I mean,
all right. You want me to take it? You want here?
I could go. But I mean, I think this is one of those situations where we talked about a little bit in the prelude. Like, sometimes you see stuff that really is a red flag and you can't just wipe it away because it's a rookie. I think, we came into this season, or at least I did, thinking, hey, he's probably at least going to start the season behind Jaylen Warren. I always thought he was going to play, basically the full season behind Jaylen Warren. And then, he'd probably take over and get the, classic bell cow Steelers role that Mike Tomlin loves in 2026 and beyond. So I really did think he was more of a 2-year play from the jump. And I actually had him at RB6 coming into the season, and I now have him all the way down at RB10. And honestly, I think it is just priors and draft capital that are preventing me from dropping him even further than that. Because I think one big thing, even before the season started, that I think we should have all taken as a red flag is, between NFL draft and even fantasy drafts, Jaylen Warren got a contract extension that I don't think we talked about nearly enough. And I think it wasn't a huge sum of money. I think it was one that we could look at and say, okay, well, maybe this is, to still be just a rotational back. But it's pretty clear that I think they paid him to be their starter for a couple of years. And honestly, the contract's looking like a bargain in that regard. But what I think not many people had on their bingo card was Kenneth Gainwell getting significantly more snaps than Caleb Johnson right out of the way. And, again, we can talk about, similar to Gibson and Stevenson in New England, but then the difference is Caleb Johnson's getting like zero work. I think if he wasn't a healthy scratch last game, he didn't see a single snap. He's doing kickoff duties, and he made a huge blunder on special teams. And, granted, those rookie mistakes happened. Like, that kickoff itself isn't going to take me off the board. I do think, him not getting the rock this past week was just good coaching, right? Like, you kind of got to punish people for their mistakes like that. But it's been really bad for Johnson. Like, everything that could possibly go wrong has. And when Jaylen Warren's continuing to look good, I'm just finding it really hard to find a path for him to find fantasy production. I think this year it's going to be almost non-existent. And even next year, it's going to be really difficult. And, if he's the number 2 or the 1B in a Steelers offense, that's probably not going to be that good. And I think 1B or 2 is the best it's going to get for him. I'm not really sure what there is to like about Caleb Johnson. And so I got him down at 10. You got anything different to say?
Yeah, I have him at 9. Absolutely nothing's gone right. So I'm going to preach patience. We're 3 games in. It's a long season. He's 2 years old. He was the 83rd overall pick. He ran for 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns last year. Things can change. A lot of things can change. I know it's been not ideal. In theory, he should be a good fit for Arthur Smith's outside zone scheme. I think I expected a little more. Yes, Jaylen Warren as the quote unquote starter, but I expected more than this. But I think from a dynasty perspective, I would go trade a 3rd round and just throw a dart, to be honest, because vibes are so bad and things change. So there's nothing on tape. There's no reason to think that besides who he was in college and draft capital. I think it's the only thing.
Yeah, and as low as I am on Caleb Johnson, I do think that price, like I would do, like if somehow the team in our league that has him is like, I'm just so out, I'll take a 3rd, 0-3, and just like I want to figure something out. Like, I'd take it, especially with our league settings where you can put him on your taxi squad and it doesn't actually eat into a roster spot. I think that's a worthwhile gamble. But if I had Caleb Johnson and someone offered me a 2nd round pick right now, like, just even if it was just like, hey, like a 2028 second, I'd probably just be like, you know what, I'll take it. I'll rinse and repeat and roll the dice again in a couple of years. Because his ADP was late 1st, early 2nd for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're taking too much of a dip there. It wouldn't feel good. But this feels like one where I'd rather just take 80 cents on the dollar now than 20 cents on the dollar this time next year if he's still not getting any work in 2026.
I'm not there yet for that price. For a 2nd next year, you could convince me. For a 28, 27 second, I think I'm waiting a couple more weeks. But man, is there a comp here? Has anyone so highly touted fallen this flat this early?
Don't get me started on, I can't even remember his name anymore. No, not Trey Benson.
Trey Benson.
What's his name?
Trey Benson. Trey Sermon.
Trey Sermon. Yes. I knew it was Trey something. That was the only one that came to my mind because it's like also a 3rd round pick. You like the offensive ecosystem, and then they kind of just get beat out by this guy who was a 7th round pick. In Elijah Mitchell's case, obviously Jaylen Warren was not a rookie this year, but he was an undrafted guy. And it's just like, you don't like to see guys get beat out by guys with that type of undrafted profile. And I think it's important to call out, like, the first 4 names we talked about were all top 40 picks. I think the last drafted was Henderson at 36, 38, something like that.
38.
And there is a pretty significant difference in team investment and willingness to continue sticking to a guy if they draft them in the middle of the third versus early second or earlier. So I do think the sunk cost component that the Steelers are feeling is they're not super incentivized to make it work with Caleb Johnson the way some of these other teams are.
Is this an Arthur Smith thing? And if he's ever gone, it'll just flip in a heartbeat.
It doesn't feel
same
like
guy
it.
Same guy who misused Bijan.
It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it. And I think the Arthur Smith stuff's gotten pretty overblown. I think we're all kind of seeing like what Kyle Pitts is now in Atlanta and being like, okay, maybe Arthur Smith was right to keep that guy off the field. Like, I think with Bijan, the knock was always like Tyler Algier's getting too much touches. I don't think he was like utilizing Bijan poorly, but I think, I don't think this is an Arthur Smith thing. I think this is the Caleb Johnson thing.
I know you have him ranked 10th, but if you had Caleb Johnson, someone offered you Ollie Gordon, would you take it? Just one for one.
Spoiler alert, Ollie Gordon is not in my top 10. So I don't think I could take that one, unfortunately. But it's crazy that I would have to think about it and would probably counter with like, oh, well, throw me a fourth or a third or something and get the conversation going. It's like at the point where I'd consider those types of trades. And, I hope for Caleb Johnson's sake, we get big and famous and someone's laughing at us for cutting these clips of us this time next year when he's producing RB1 numbers, but not a bet I'm willing to make.
I preached patience, even though I knocked him down 4 spots. All right. Anything else? Top 5 rookie running back reassessment after 3 weeks. Man, we might have to do this again in 7 weeks to see if we overreacted or if we are on it.
I'm down to. I love talking rookies. Love talking running backs. So I'm here for it, and I'm looking forward to, I think, continuing the conversation.
Get a mosquito net going, my friend.
I'll do what I can. I don't have one in this hotel, but I'm in the city,